It is an interesting topic that Tom and I have been navigating for a while. So, if you're looking to understand who Tom is, he's got a beautiful history. I would certainly recommend that you go back and see the first episode where Tom talked about his background and his history and the passion that led Tom to do what he does, which is a wonderful thing in the resource planning. And last episode, we covered recognizing resources, and we also talked about discernment in this whole thing. So, this episode, Tom and I are going to explore a guided by justice. It's a topic that is close to Tom's heart and my heart. So we are going to see where it leads us. Tom, it's great to have you again. I look forward
Thank
to
you
this
so
time.
much. Pleasure to be with you again, to chat with you again, and see where the conversation leads.
Thank you. I was looking at the outline that was drafted many months back uh, earlier, and whatever manifested through you at that time. So I was fascinated with that starting point, which is seeking righteousness above all else.
Yeah. It I haven't heard too many people address this topic in a business environment, and that saddens me because I think it's a completely different challenge to pursue righteousness in the marketplace, to attempt in every way to conduct yourself righteously in all of your dealings with clients, coworkers, staff, just the whole challenge of integrity in business. It's just way too easy, way too simplistic to say the goal of any business is to maximize profit. Um, that's a rather easy thing to poke holes in, right? No, it's not. Of course, it's not. Even though there are some that will just cling to that as if right now, I'm not even going to encounter the debate. If you're looking for something that actually has enduring value, that will cultivate the kind of culture and relationships and trustworthiness that you want to cultivate with staff and coworkers, I don't know of a better word to summarize what underpins all of that
Mm.
than pursuing righteousness. And I think a very close parallel is justice, but if you want to pursue justice, then make sure you're also pursuing mercy.
Mm.
And the justice, mercy, and humility triad kind of completes more of an Old Testament understanding of Jesus' summary of seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and everything else will basically take care of himself. If you really do seek and pursue what is right and just and good for everyone, you're not going to go wrong.
Mm.
And certainly I've run across a lot of business people that say, that's a guaranteed way to business failure. I've got 30 years experience that says that's wrong,
Yeah.
right? That the more integrity you can attain, possess, retain, project, share, the more you build trust, reputation. I don't remember if we talked about this last episode or not, but I recently watched a very brief interview with Warren Buffett, and he talked about what he shares with all of his leadership team first of every year is that we can lose money,
Yeah.
we can get that back. We cannot afford to lose reputation. And to me, the strongest aspect of reputation that anybody can ever have is a reputation for integrity, for righteousness in all of their dealings. And I think there are some just incredibly specific and pragmatic um, applications in running any business, in how you treat employees, how you deal with compensation, how you deal with benefits, how you treat a manufacturing enterprise or a retail enterprise. Are you treating your customers equitably and fairly? Are you giving a fair price? Are you giving honest estimates of delivery? Are you treating your employees fairly and not demanding unreasonable or preferential, making preferential demands on one versus the other to the challenge of treating everybody well and respecting everybody as valuable, that naturally flows to the way you handle all of your resources, your cash, the parts, the space, this harmony of everything that it takes to actually run an enterprise, lead an enterprise. It's not nearly as much about control as a lot of people would have you believe. It's so much more about leading by example, about leading with soul, about sharing honestly and transparently with the people you're working with about what value system drives you, understanding what value system drives them, and being aligned on what good looks like. If we have a common understanding, and I really think worldwide that understanding is a lot more common than what gets clickbait on the news. We have a very widely shared understanding of what good looks like, and I think it applies in business probably more profoundly than in any other aspect of life. Certainly marriage and family and close relationships, but we spend so many hours, so much of our energy in the marketplace and our businesses and our places of work that if you can't apply it there, then who are you kidding, right? If you're trying to be one person at home and a different person at work, I don't think. I was trying to remember where this sign is on my wall. It's at my office, not at my home. But my wife recently gave me the wall plaque of "Don't mistake my kindness for weakness."
Yes.
You know, there's strength in wisdom and in righteousness and in justice. It can be kind, but it is never weak. And I love finding the places where that applies in all of the different functional areas of a business and how they relate to each other.
And this is profound, right? As you said, righteousness, that pursuing that, we get everything else along the way. You know, we don't have to be worried about the tangible stuff, as we say, be it profits or relationships or anything else. Seek righteousness and everything else gets given to you. Like, it's a natural thing that comes out.
One of the places that I think shows up so much on the opposite end of the spectrum, or the other end of the seesaw, if you will, is I watch so many people get caught in the tension between looking good and being good. That fundamental misalignment of behavior, when your bosses or your compensation paradigm or whatever you think it takes to be successful as a business leader or a business manager, when what it takes to look good in their eyes is not the same thing as being good, doing what is good, doing what is right. The more those two things diverge, the more you are setting yourself up for immense levels of stress and internal division, and you're going to end up in a constant debate with yourself. And we can become our own worst enemy in so many ways. I think I run into a lot of people that kind of live lives full of regret, remorse, guilt, shame, because that misalignment of trying to look good rather than be good, just clean up on the surface without actually paying attention to what drives your behavior, it's a bad path. It leads to destruction.
Yeah, and I was, I'm digressing from the script, but it's an important topic. I was reading about greenwashing and where it originates from, and as you said, it's the constant pursuit of looking good or ticking a box, or it's a temporary gain, which leads into a very drastic loss. So, be it short term or long term, that pursuit of looking good is not going to help anyone.
Exactly. And, there are so many easily discredited traps that are still very common. the wearing of a mask, the appearance, the all of the effort that can go into, even back in the Army days, right? The three-star general's coming, so we're going to paint all the rocks. Okay, I get the discipline part of that, but do you really think a three-star general is going to think more highly of you because your rocks are painted, right? Now, I got criticized often, deservedly so, because I did not shine my shoes well while in the Army. And okay, there's a certain lack of discipline reflected in wearing shoes that aren't shined or putting on a shirt that's dirty. My wife is very good about helping me remember to present myself well, but when that becomes to present myself falsely, to pretend, that one of the writers that I just absolutely love, passed away not too many years ago, Brent Curtis. He had a background in family therapies, psychology, psychiatrist. And he said that the most common fear that his clients shared was the fear of being discovered to be a fraud. That everything I'm trying to make people believe about me, I'm afraid they're going to find out I'm not that. I'm not what I pretend to be. I'm not as good in person as I try to make myself look on paper or online. And that sense of fear that people will know me as I am, and if they know me as I am, they won't love me, they won't like me, I'll lose my job. It's just a spiraling negative pathway. And so, the solution is to close the gap between what I want people to believe about me and who I really am. And I think there's just so much in Scripture about the knowledge of God, of you as you are, even from the time you were in the womb, that there's just no sense in pretending to be for God. So if God already knows and loves you as you are, why are you so worried about what other people are going to think? But go ahead.
And this is a powerful concept, right? So, like, as in my line of work, we end up rescuing programs or, checking on programs that are going off track and all that. But the commonality among all of them is that all of them are reported green. So it's, as you said, it's the, wanting to be good or the looking good overtakes the reality, which then creates a false reality.
Exactly. And one of my former clients, I mean, just to emphasize, from top to bottom of any organization, the truth is just so apparent. But one of my former clients was Hughes Corporation. And early in my relationship with Hughes, they went through a scandalous time when one of their major projects had been reported to the board and to the shareholders and to the SEC as being on schedule and under budget. And they kept sustaining that report until it was glaringly obvious that no, you were supposed to deliver it yesterday and you're $1 million or $1 billion, or, it just masking what you already know to be bad news because you're afraid to give the bad news to the decision makers. Well, the truth comes out eventually. And, there was a vice president fired and a division sold, and there were just all kinds of negative repercussions. And, we don't even need to get started into the trials and tribulations that Boeing Corporation is going through right now. But it is so common. I hate to single out any company because it is so widespread that people are incentivized to make themselves look better than they are. And the wider that gap gets, the more toxic the self and the organization become. So closing that gap and, having the confidence to be who you are, to disclose and be transparent about your weaknesses, your shortcomings, what you can't do, what you don't overpromise, et cetera, and just deal with reality from ground to top. I think you have your strongest, healthiest organizations. I often praise Elon Musk. I just, for an awful lot of reasons, I think he's one of the most iconic figures in our generation. By no means am I declaring him to be perfect. I'm not even sure he would want me to declare him to be righteous. But one thing I admire greatly is how he has responded to failures. You know, when his rocket that he tries, goes up and it only goes so far, and then there's a scheduled destruction or whatever he calls it, it failed, but not in the sense of failing to learn from or improve from. Just the transparency with which he goes about his business in the face of all kinds of global criticism is just inspiring to me. And I don't believe he's alone. I believe there are many unsung heroes that are conducting themselves day to day in small businesses and large in a way that just lets you know this is somebody I can trust. This is somebody I believe is going to tell me the truth, even if it's embarrassing to them. And that I don't know how to put a price tag on that. It's priceless.
And that's the value, right? So
Yes,
being open to admit the failure, if you want to
exactly.
name it that. But
Right.
on the other hand, it is that moment that develops trust, and trust of stakeholders, trust of people, trust of investors. It's like, in Elon's case, he's open to declare the failure. Yes, there is a lot of people who are going to laugh at it and all that stuff. But there are a lot of people like you and me and many others who would say, that is an authentic guy. I'm going to trust
Right.
that whatever the next thing is. It may not succeed, but that's okay. He's putting,
Exactly.
hand in heart and say, yep, we tried, we did this. In this case, we failed, we'll try again. So yeah, that's far better than someone who says, I've had no incidents since time immemorial, and then you see a big jet going down.
Exactly.
Mm.
I've been extremely fortunate with the people that I have been surrounded by throughout my career. Early in my career, when I was first becoming trusted with larger decisions, I made a math error, and like math major, this is what I did not expect from myself. I did not expect to make math errors. And I made a math error in a negotiation that ended up costing my client $1 million. And I felt devastated. And I was just surrounded by people that understood. They were older, wiser, had been through, and yes, of course, I had done things that helped my clients be more profitable. I wasn't trying to measure the pluses and the minuses. I was just feeling terrible about the mistake. And one of the people I worked very closely with, right, I asked her, does this make you trust me less that I've made this glaring error? And she said, no, it makes you human. It makes you understandable and relatable. And that really is a part of the fabric of community. There is a gentleman who is also from Kentucky, often referred to as the poet laureate of Kentucky, Wendell Berry. And one of his chief themes, where a lot of people will talk about, what goes wrong in a society, a lot of people will talk about the breakdown of the family. He makes a very strong case that it's much broader than that. It's when the community breaks down that you expose the weaknesses. Because in any family, there are dysfunctional relationships, things that go awry, alienation. But in a strong community, there are extended family members, neighbors, coaches, pastors, teachers of all kinds that just instinctively fill in the gaps where needs are not being met. And it's that redundant relationship of culture that really builds the strength. And so pretending, I don't remember if I've told you the story or not, one of the guys I worked with while I was in college in a volunteer capacity, He was a Vietnam vet who had gone through an awful lot of psychological pain. And he walked with a limp. You knew that he had been wounded. He didn't want to talk about it. I honored that. We were carrying furniture together. We were carrying a small upright piano down a ramp of a rental truck, and he took a bad step. He took one step off the ramp, and the piano fell on the ramp, and he fell on the ground. And I was concerned. He was a good bit older than me. I was in my, I was barely 20. And so I reached out a hand to help him stand up, and he slapped my hand away. And he said, I have never needed a hand to stand up, and I'm not going to start now. Now, I'm going to give grace where I can. Whatever he had been through that he couldn't talk about, that I understand some of the dynamics that made him that resistant to becoming dependent on others. He didn't want to have to depend on anyone, but I think he also taught me something about how dangerous that is, to become so stubbornly independent and self-sufficient. You're kidding yourself.
Yeah.
If you slap every hand away and never accept help, you need to embrace the fact that you're a part of a community and that your mistakes are not fatal to everyone. And I understand in some cases they are fatal. There are life decisions, but the fabric of the community is so much stronger than any one individual. And I actually think I see a movement in the business community to have a better understanding of the strength of culture within a business, the strength of trust and loyalty and trustworthiness, and trying to, people are not interchangeable parts. We've talked about that before. And, rapid turnover just really cuts at the fabric of what strengthens us. And, I've got the good fortune of working with people that I have worked with for 30 years or more. We know each other. We know each other's strengths and weaknesses. We know where to be and what to do to cover for each other. And you don't build that quickly. That takes time. And I know I'm talking to somebody who understands that takes generations or centuries, in the culture that you were raised in. I think America is still in its infancy by comparison, and we have a lot of growing up to do.
On the brighter side, it's good to see businesses moving towards recognizing that value, right? So that people are not interchangeable parts. We are who we are, the human dynamic, and what we bring to the table as
exactly.
community.
And it's to see that only in the sense of, HR department and employee retention, try to keep everybody happy. That's not the ultimate point. The ultimate point is you get to know each other, because as a team, you function more cohesively and more effectively when you actually know deeply, with integrity and transparency, the people that you're working with and solving problems with. That's what you're looking for, is that cohesiveness.
Sorry to interrupt. Yeah, it's a very interesting reference, right? In Acts, I think, when this group of disciples who are very afraid, they confine themselves to a small space, but they're together, they're praying, and then they're filled with the Spirit, and they go and do miracles that no one can fathom. And this happens because people come together, are open with their vulnerabilities, willing to share, because we all want one thing. Like, everybody wants success. If you're working for an organization, you want that to succeed. And instead of going about it the greenwashing way, how about be authentic and be vulnerable? Be willing to ask for help and accept help. And together we succeed.
And I think the vulnerability is the antidote to the insecurity. Because all of us suffer from insecurities. And, right now we're going through a time with one of my clients when there's a threat of layoffs, of,
all that stuff,
reductions in force. And when people grow insecure about their own job, about their own finances, they behave worse.
Yeah.
They treat each other worse, but not always.
Yeah.
Because when your truest, deepest sense of security comes from something other than your paycheck, then you are more able to risk, more able to reach out, to go, to unlock the door and get out in the world, knowing that it's a dangerous place, but to open yourself up to new opportunities, new possibilities. And I think finding more enduring sources of our own security is a huge part of that. And I actually do believe that business environments are foundational to that. If you work in a place where you are in constant fear that if you make one mistake, you're going to be fired or demoted or lose money, you will be punished. Right. I think I told you before, a friend of mine in Mississippi had this line that was so dark, the flogging shall continue until morale improves. If you live in an environment where every bad deed will be punished and most good deeds will be ignored, then you're going to live and work as an insecure person.
And that's a recipe for failure, right? So you're just accelerating failure by creating an environment like that. So.
And people tend to fragment and tribalize and just go at, blame each other and attack each other. And it's just one of the worst things that you can see happen in a complex organization.
Yeah, and the world has a lot to learn from the history, what history has taught us, all these techniques we've tried as humanity and we've failed. And it's time to look at something deeper, something more meaningful and time tested, as you say, that has worked for us. So why don't we embrace them?
And I really do believe that so often, it's an old saying, it's an ancient saying, that a picture's worth 1,000 words. Well, an experience is worth 1,000 pictures. So we capture a little from watching on TV, the euphoria that comes from a team working together to win a gold medal. I don't know how to describe that. I certainly don't know how to explain it, but I recognize it. I resonate with it when I see people just people who've accomplished great things in their lives already that just are experiencing this euphoria of joining together with a team against intense competition and finding victory. And you can say the same thing for the teams that lose. The pain that goes with losing is a shared pain. And that the sharing of the burden, the sharing of the pain is so much better than that hatred turned inward. That, you're still a part of a team, whether you're meeting with triumph or disaster. And, treating those two imposters just the same. To quote Kipling, I think it is.
That's interesting, right? Like we've touched on this. Goodness is a better guide in the long run. So it's like, look at the facts with us, like all this greenwashing or looking good type of strategies. They have not helped us. So.
Right. That makes me kind of want to touch on tip of the iceberg, and then we just go as far down into the iceberg as you want to lead. But the way businesses treat their clients is a litmus test for your understanding of what good looks like, what it looks like authentically. I'm not necessarily opposed to giving preferential treatment to your best customers. This is something I understand. It's a part of the building of loyalty, brand loyalty, trustworthiness. I've got people that I have been working with now for 40 or even 50 years. And that reputation is absolutely solid. And I think it is natural and good to be more cautious with people less well. But that's not the same as treating people unfairly. give the newcomer a chance. Treat people with the benefit of the doubt. I will trust you until you give me a reason not to. And if you give me, fool me once, shame on me, fool me, you know what, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me. To learn through the benefit of the doubt, which suppliers are trustworthy and meet their promise dates and meet their quality requirements, which don't, which customers are fair and reasonable in their expectations and their demands. But I do believe that at the tiniest increment, back to there's the constrained asset, right? There's not enough to go around. It's very similar to the kid that has a friend over for dinner and mom only prepared 4 pork chops and now there's 5 people at the table. What do? Well, a little geometry, a little math, you cut the pork chops up and you give everybody some sort of an equal serving. I think I might have shared with you my mother's idea of justice. My brother was 18 months older and we competed about everything. And so if there was pie, he always wanted to make sure he had a larger slice of pie than I did because he was bigger and older and all of that. And I didn't like that very much. So mom's solution was, my brother's name's Butch. She said, Butch, you cut 2 slices of pie and Tom, you pick which one you want. My brother could have gotten out a slide rule, a protractor, a laser. He was incentivized to make sure those 2 slices of pie were exactly the same so that no matter which one I picked, the result was fair. And so there are so many creative ways to achieve something that is fair, just, right, reasonable. And it's not simply a matter of who's bigger and stronger or yells louder or complains more, the squeaky wheel phenomenon, the punitive side of it. But to have the courage to actually treat your customers and your clients justly, fairly, a fair and reasonable response. I think a lot of, business lawsuits even end up in high courts where there are tests applied to see if you have treated your clients in a fair and reasonable manner, if you have done the due diligence, if you have given honest service. These are difficult principles to apply in a court of law. They're also difficult to apply in decisions that you make 100 times a day. But it's good practice to pursue the same principles in the decisions you make every day.
And this is interesting, right? Someone told me this. So everyone starts with the same level of trust, expectations, and everything. From that point, then you build it up or you retract it. So it's like the baseline is the same. So in human relationship, business relationships, everywhere. So you start with a fair base, and it is in every individual has a choice involved in that relationship to either push it up or push it down. So
now I agree with you totally. I think there's like an amendment to that I learned from the same writer I mentioned before, Brent Curtis, that we come into life the same way we would enter a movie that's halfway over. An awful lot has happened to people before we meet them. An awful lot has happened in any situation before we enter the picture. And so by the time we encounter people and business situations, we won't know the history. We won't know the background. We won't know the scars, the wounds, and those take time to get to know. So in many cases, if somebody is acting in a way that makes you suspicious of them, there's probably a reason. And I don't mean that as an excuse, but a part of getting to know somebody is getting to know the reasons for their behavior. I'm rather transparent to a comic proportion about the fact that I have grown into a grumpy old man. I am jaded, cynical, and skeptical. I've been lied to many times. That doesn't mean I can always tell when I'm being lied to, but I have a pretty strong sense. And so I continue to have to fight against the knee-jerk bias of you sound just like somebody else who cheated me, therefore you must be a liar. Not necessarily, right? You can't, that's too big of a conclusion jump.
Yeah.
But you can still be discerning without being judgmental. And I think we do learn to discern people's integrities in the context. The gentleman that slapped my hand, knowing his history in Vietnam, allows me to be much more gracious in understanding why he behaved the way he did. And we remained friends and we continued to work together. And I knew it wasn't personally directed against me. So that depth of understanding of people's stories and their backgrounds really helps you know how to build a cohesive team.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is the discerning part of it that comes in us, right? So it's like as we approach the end of the episode, what we want to be focusing on is fundamental concepts, information integrity as it's exchanged, and cross-functional collaboration and genuine care.
I was joking with somebody earlier today. It's kind of a common theme. When we first started working with computers in business, it was the old washing machine style printers that had the 130 column green and white bar. And there was this phenomenon when that first appeared that if something appeared on that kind of computer paper, it must be true. And you know, you want it to be, and certainly the programmers and everybody involved wanted it to be, but not necessarily. You know, the whole garbage in, garbage out thing became. But now information integrity has become almost infinitely more complex than that now. And the sourcing of information incredibly difficult. Even AI is suspect on the sourcing of their information. You know, some of the AI routines will make up bibliographies that sound good. But to know that you learned something from somebody you trust also means you trust that they got their information from a source they trust. And that trust can carry through many layers, but once it starts to erode, you know, then the doubt creeps in and things start to crumble. Degrees of certainty is one of the themes that I find very fascinating. I really wish that we in the information business could get more accustomed to the range of certainty. You know, to me, an awful lot of the data that I present, when it moves into the trend analysis, turning into a forecast. I think somebody recently quoted Deming as saying all management is forecasting or predictive. Well, in central Kentucky, predicting the weather is almost impossible. So, you know, is it going to rain tomorrow? It might. If we could find more accurate, more transparent, more humble ways of saying, how sure are you that this or that is going to happen, and get better at the degree of confidence. We can communicate an awful lot of that in our tone when it's face to face, or even in our body language. You know, like when I shrug my shoulders and I say 5 miles, you know I'm not giving you an exact answer. But the more we digitize and the more we automate, the more we lose that nuance. Yes. The nuance of certainty doesn't make its way up into the corporate reports, which is why I'm still a very strong believer in face-to-face reporting analysis. Yeah, yes, I can write it down. I can show you my assumptions, my methodologies, my conclusions. But if I can get a chance to be face-to-face with you and walk you through how I came to the conclusion I did, then I can expose the areas of vulnerability and sensitivity of my own model. And I think we've talked before that in some recent, you know, embarrassing failures of modeling, whether it's, you know, climate models or epidemiology models, or even going back to the 2008, 100%, this mortgage-backed security cannot fail. the lack of humility of there has almost destroyed the quantitative analysis profession because we're just not honest enough
That's
about how
interesting.
certain we are and aren't.
And that is interesting, right? So, like whether we discuss projects or business or, even human relationships,
Mm-hmm.
information, as you say, it's increasingly hard to source, and
Right.
these days we never know where it gets corroded. So it's the humility that's the element
Mm-hmm.
that can bring us back into, yep, this is accepted for what it is, and be willing to work with what comes next, like predicting rain in Kentucky.
Right. Deal with all the possible things that might go wrong. And this is where I go back so much to, how much I learned from backpacking
Hmm.
on the trails in the Great Smoky Mountains. Yeah, of course you don't know what the weather's going to be. You don't know if there's going to be ice. You don't know if there's going to be a tree fall and everything else. So you prepare. You
Yeah.
prepare for what is reasonable, what might happen. Very real life example that's hit really hard, like in the past week in my own client's world. There are some very complex end items whose delivery dates are threatened
Mhm.
by 7 layers down,
Yeah.
components that the incumbent vendor
Mhm.
has gone out of business through the pandemic. And so the buyer is currently searching for another supplier
Okay.
who can make that component. And this might be a component, we found one this week, that the last time it was bought was about 20 years ago and it cost $3. And the buyer can't find a supplier for that part. But that part goes into this part, this part. And so you've got, a multi-million-dollar deliverable that can't be built until we find somebody. Okay, how long is it going to take you to find a supplier? I don't know. So when is this part going to be delivered? I don't know. So why should we tell the customer about when the end item will be delivered? Yes, you can make educated, informed guesses, but I think the most important thing to communicate is here is the source of the uncertainty. Here are the areas of least knowledge. Here are the places. Have you and I talked about the old joke about the drunk looking for his car keys?
Oh, yeah.
Uh,
It'll be nice
that's
to hear
remember
that
that.
again. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, you find somebody looking for his car keys under a street light, and you think, well, he must have dropped his keys under the street light, but no, he's looking under the street light because that's where the light is. He actually dropped his keys over there where you can't see a thing. Well, where are the dark corners of data, of
Mhm.
information that, some people call them the known unknowns?
Mhm.
You know, highlight those. Don't hide them and conceal them and pretend to be more knowledgeable than you are. Highlight the areas where the knowledge is missing. I don't remember if you and I talked about the Dead Sea Scrolls. I was absolutely fascinated to see an exhibit of some of the Dead Sea Scrolls, and it's quite a shock to a lot of beginning biblical scholars that we do not have complete original documents of any of the books of Scripture. We have fragments and pieces that scholars have pieced together, and there are gaps.
Yeah.
And so the scholars extrapolate, what must be in this gap, and maybe they disagree, and that's why one translation differs from another. And so, but they're, if you read the documents behind the translations, they're very open and transparent about how they came to this conclusion and what this word might mean. A lot of the footnotes say, this could mean this instead of that. The overall meaning does not change much,
Yeah.
right? You're trying to be more precise. So the seasoned veterans are going to tell me they'll find a supplier for that $3 part. Well, how long is it going to take? 30 days. How do you know that? Because they've lived through similar situations 1,000 times.
Mhm.
It's not certainty, but it is a judgment that is actually more valuable than the quantifiable information that you have. And I think when you learn how to weave in judgment, human intelligence into the digital intelligence, the result is a much more robust understanding of where you stand. And I think that needs to perpetuate all the way to the program manager calling the customer and saying, look, we've discovered a couple of problems here. Who knows? The customer might be able to help you. But don't just say, yeah, everything's fine. We're under budget. We're on schedule. Don't worry about a thing. Open up about what you don't know, about what problems you've encountered, and invite the community to include your suppliers and your customers and your coworkers. Here are the problems we as a team are facing. Let's face them, collaborate across functions, across backgrounds, and you'll find solutions, creative solutions from unexpected sources. Not the person whose job description it was to solve that problem, but from somebody who has worked with somebody who just happens to know.
Unrelated sources, right? Yeah. That's what I really love talking to you about. And now we talk about the final thing as we finish this episode, the power of authentic care.
Right. It's actually more difficult to put into words, but I think an awful lot of what we've talked about sheds light on. It's an old saying. I think it's an ancient aphorism. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. If you're just trying to come across as knowledgeable, and the old saying, information is power. If you fall in love with the power of having more information than somebody else, if you really love being the smartest, most well-informed person in the room, then you're going to find that that's not a strong stool to stand on, because the knowledge itself is actually not the source of the power. It's the reputation that comes with having trustworthy knowledge, of being found to be a true prophet and not a false prophet. And the truthfulness is relational. I am a strong believer that at its core, the word truth speaks to relationship much more than it speaks to fact. If I am being honest with you, I am speaking the truth to you in a way that whole process of communication between the words I choose and my understanding of how you're going to hear and understand those words, what your associations are, that whole process of communication being effective requires that we know each other, that we understand each other, that we know that the words are being used in the same ways. My wife and I are entertained by watching a lot of British television. And we laugh at each other sometimes when the words come up that the British use a word that the Americans use, but it means a completely different thing.
Yeah.
And that happens so often. There are so many miscommunications where, yes, it's a correct word in one sense, but it doesn't mean the same thing to the listener as it does to the speaker. So that relational authenticity of, you can trust that I'm going to do the work, not only to show you that I know stuff, but to promote your understanding. I don't really want to walk away from an important conversation without a sense that the other party in the conversation understands what I'm trying to convey, not just that I get credit for having provided the data. And I think this is where we are on such thin ice when we over automate, that I don't know how in the world you ever integrate a human level of understanding into something that can be expressed in ones and zeros. It's too rich, too deep, we can't explain it to ourselves.
Yeah.
So, but that's the authenticity that is caring and compassionate, the desire for the other person to understand more.
And And thank you for this, Tom, sir. As we conclude this episode, and as you rightly pointed out, it's the righteousness, seeking righteousness, that gives all the other things that we discussed in this episode, which is integrity, our cross-functional collaboration, and more importantly, the care that determines how we are, so as humans. And thank you for this, and thank you for the insights on beautiful stuff on manufacturing. I always love this time.
Thank you, Judith. You always bring out the best in me and you inspire me in so many ways. Thank you again for the opportunity.